What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Talking Elite Fitness. I'm Sean Woodland with Lauren Khalil and Tommy Marquez. Team quarterfinals are behind us, and the two of you now are getting set to take on individual quarterfinals. How are we feeling as we go into this stage of the season?
Ooh. Lauren, you go first.
I was going to say the same thing.
My trick knee's acting up now. That was what that was.
You know, my body actually feels pretty good. I've been very consistent with training. However, I traveled to Texas today, and I'm going to be doing some tactical games training and an athlete camp. And then next week I'll do quarterfinals. So we'll see how we feel when they roll around. I don't know.
I feel pretty beat up just from training. Like I will say, like, this last few weeks I've actually been like doing the things that I suck at. Like going below parallel a lot, getting upside down a lot. And as a result, my body's just like,
yep.
And so, I mean, that's probably a good thing for my overall fitness and just getting ready. But yeah, I'm actually pretty excited though.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys are able to do. I know you've been looking forward to this part of the competition, and wish everybody the best of luck who is going to be participating. We had a really busy show today. Got a lot to talk about. It's so funny as we kind of get the week started. We think, man, what are we talk about this week? And then stuff happens. There's a lot of news breaking. But Lauren, you mentioned you're going to Texas for the tactical games. This is another qualifier, correct? That they have going on.
Yes. So this coming weekend, it's actually a tactical games training camp where, like, if you're new to it or you just want to like get some of the best instructors to help you with whether it's pistol work, rifle work, or the like fitness aspect of it, they have different stations that you can do. And then on the final day, you'll actually like do a tactical game simulation. So I'll be doing that this weekend, staying in Texas. And that's when the following weekend, they will have one of their, this isn't a regional qualifier. It is a regional event, but it's actually teams. So a bunch of their like elite athletes will just be going with like a friend or maybe a competitor in the elites, and teams of two. Should be fun.
Cool. Well, if you're wondering what else is going on in the fitness world this weekend, we got Europe's Strongest Man. That's happening in Leeds, England. And then High Rocks, they're competing in Cologne. So got a couple things going on across the pond as far as fitness is concerned. Europe's Strongest Man and another High Rocks race. So if you're looking to just follow some stuff, you got that going on. So we're going to try to keep you guys posted as far as like what events are happening around you that have to do with people doing fun fitness things, whether it's like large men lifting heavy weights or people shooting targets or High Rocks races. It's all part of it. So a lot of good stuff going on this weekend. But let's get into our sponsor for today. And it is the stuff that I say is, I was thinking about this the other night. If my house were on fire, what is the first thing that I'm grabbing? And it's going to be my Thirdsy. I'm grabbing the Thirdsy first because I look, my wife and my son, they got legs. They can move. They can fend for themselves. Dogs are going to be fine. They're just probably going to run off. So now what does that leave me? Got to get that Thirdsy. Like, that's what's coming. That's what's coming out.
I mean, that's a good.
Tell me I'm wrong. It's
I love it.
This is Thirdsy. Like, if you're looking to improve your sleep and your recovery, you've got to check this stuff out. Admittedly, I do not get enough sleep, but my quality of sleep has increased so much so that the 3 of the last 4 days, I've been awake at 4 a.m. to get to the gym at 5. Okay. I feel like today, did I get enough sleep? Probably not, but I took my Thirdsy. I got to bed earlier than I usually do.
Yeah.
And felt really good going to the gym at 5 a.m. because I got good quality sleep. It's an awesome tasting drink that you mix in with some water at night. It doesn't have any melatonin in it, so it's not habit forming, and I absolutely love it. It's been a total, and this term is used all the time, but it has been an absolute game changer for me.
Yeah. And I find for me, one of my biggest issues around sleep is like I like to watch shows right before bed, and I have a hard time winding down. It's almost like that process of like, all right, I'm done with my show. I go mix some Thirdsy. I start that kind of sequence is almost like my body's like signaling again, like, all right, we're winding down a little bit more. And I get a little bit of help from Thirdsy in that wind down process. And honestly, I think that's as good as a tagline as you could come up with. That's what Sean's grabbing in a fire. Thirdsy, more important than wedding photos and jewelry. I don't know,
Those are all digital. Those are on the cloud, man. I can get access to those.
Oh my God, I love it. It's okay that your house is going to burn down because you're still going to get really great sleep, even with all the trauma that you've been through.
Yes, you'll be just fine. So you can
wind down from House of Dragon.
That's right. You can go to Thursday.com. You can use our code. It's TEF, and you can receive 20% off. That's the right code, right? I'm giving the people the right code. Am I fibbing there?
Yep.
Nope, that's right.
TEF. Sometimes I forget because we have different codes with different people. I'm like, is it TEF or Elite? It is TEF. Thursday.com. Use the code TEF. You're going to save 20%. You're going to sleep better. And you're going to just realize that, man, I was not sleeping as well as I can with Thursday. And like I said, I know right where that's going. If there's an emergency at the house, grab my Thursday.
And they have travel packs.
They do. Those are great too.
It doesn't even matter if you're traveling.
Lauren's got those in her suitcase right now. So please check them out. They're fantastic people. They've been awesome partners. Thursday.com and use our code TEF. All right, let's get into headlines. First thing we want to get to, this happened actually last week after we had recorded. It was not, I don't know if there's a big deal made of it, but something that we should tell people about. But Hustle Up has been named the official sponsor of the Masters Teenage and Adaptive CrossFit Games and CrossFit Games semifinals. And I'll read from the press release that was sent out on April the 5th. CrossFit LLC today announced Hustle Up as an official sponsor of the Masters Teenage and Adaptive CrossFit Games. As previously announced, the Masters CrossFit Games by Legends will take place on August 29th through September 1st at the Birmingham Jefferson Convention Center in Birmingham, Alabama. The Teenage CrossFit Games by Pit Teen Throwdown will be held August 29th through September 1st in Kalamazoo and Three Rivers, Michigan. And the Adaptive CrossFit Games by Wheel Wad will be hosted in San Antonio, Texas, September 19th through the 22nd at the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. And really, Hustle Up, this is about Hustle Up under the heading in the press release. Hustle Up was born out of the willingness to gather people who share a vision of fitness as a lifestyle. More than ever, the world needs unity and people with healthy bodies and minds. Hustle Up's ambitious goal is to unite and gather all people together by providing a global platform to cover the needs humans might have in one place, the Hustle Up app. And as far as I understand, too, CrossFit is going to be using this as sort of a communications tool for semifinals, where they can get news out and things like that. So that was just...
Versus what? Their own app?
Don't know.
Yeah, it has to do with like the volunteers.
Is that feature built into their app? I don't know. They're going to use it, I think, internally. I'll try to find it here in the press release. But again, just something that crossed our radar, something you may have heard about, but that's what it is. So not much to really talk about with that, but got another partner on board with CrossFit when it pertains to, I think, what they're doing in the semifinals and also the adaptive and teenage and Legends Masters Championship events.
Yeah. And it says semifinals organizers will be able to use the app to communicate with volunteers and semifinals spectators and can book events within Vendor Village through the app.
Yes.
I think that's, in theory, that's cool, but this late in the season already, you think that those events haven't already worked out their own communication processes? I think that's like, yeah, that's a cool thing, but it's not going to be practical in using it unless they already have that signed up because you signed them as a sponsor a week ago. I would imagine a lot of these event organizers and partners that have long-standing relationships within the community in terms of operating these events probably have something else figured out. So,
well, we will see. Just another brand on board. I don't know. This is the first time I've heard of Hustle Up, but they're going to be involved. So I thought we should let everybody know about that. Well, another thing that happened yesterday, I believe it was, recorded this on Thursday, was the whole Berman versus Mertens bar facing burpees matchup. Now, I'm going to throw a timeout here. 3 minutes, 44 seconds, 100 bar facing burpees, 3 minutes, 44 seconds. That wasn't even the winning time.
It was a wild experience to watch.
This was on. It was on Barbell Spin. They streamed this thing. It was Mertens versus Jake Berman, and Colten won this thing in 3 minutes and 19 seconds. Now, just 3 minutes and 19 seconds for bar facing burpees.
I need bathroom breaks longer than that.
That's incredible.
Yikes. Lauren eats a lot of cheese.
Well, and here's the cool thing too is that we've talked about this a lot. It's
I've
like,
had some stomach issues, so maybe
these formats are a great way for athletes to compete, go head to head, not wreck themselves. And it's not all about, well, we have to find the fittest and have a well-balanced test. It's like, let's just see who's the fastest, and that could be fun, kind of like we were talking about with reps ahead. So if you haven't already, you can go check it out on the Barbell Spin YouTube channel. But my God,
that's
if you said 344, I'd be like, well, that's going to win.
That's 100 bar facing burpees in an average, just like a fraction under 2 seconds a rep.
Oh, man.
The speed at which these two guys were doing them, and they both have a different technique, and it's interesting because almost through 50 of the bar facing burpees, Jake Berman was ahead. It was the back half where Colten got him by like half a rep, and then he just, I mean, Colten's pace never tapered. It stayed the same from the first burpee to the last. Crazy. Humbling.
I mean, clinical right there.
Not sure we used to have a saying for that. It involved what? Magnesium in a match. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And lighting certain parts of your anatomy on. Yeah.
It was like, yeah, you basically dipped your ball bag in magnesium and lit a match.
Well, congratulations to Colten Mertens. 3 minutes, 19 seconds. That, damn. That is incredible.
Time to be alive.
Yeah. And, there you go. Okay. Next headline we want to get to is this was something that people were talking about on Dave's weekly recap video, Dave Castro's. And the question was from someone, I'm going to paraphrase here, about the Open not mattering to the best athletes. And Dave's response, and again, this is paraphrasing, included the sentiment that we're going to change that soon. Or we're going to change that.
We'll make it matter again.
We'll make it matter again. Which means that
change again.
Something is going to change. Now, how drastic that's going to be, when it's going to be, no idea. But that, I don't know what that's going to look like. I mean, I could guess.
But what again? What's this thing like? Make it matter to whom? To the elite athletes?
I think so.
The Open. I mean, after I would say 2012, maybe 2013, when it was pretty clear if you were an elite I would say after 2012, it was pretty clear that you're a games athlete. The Open was a formality. If you really wanted to like win or be at the top, that was more of a pride thing. It wasn't going to necessarily jeopardize your chance to go to regionals and you know, move on in the season. So from a competitive standpoint, you could make the argument that the only time the Open has really mattered was for elites was 2011, 2012, and then from 2013 on, it depended on whether or not you wanted to be in the top heat to start the weekend.
Right.
And that's fair.
But
outside of that, I would say then 2019, 2020, it mattered for a direct qualification standpoint, but it almost like it was weird because it felt like you were trying to force something from the Open that it wasn't designed to do. And I think from a competition standpoint, just didn't really make a lot of sense to me in terms of direct qualification from the Open. Like that was, I don't know, especially given the circumstances of doing it in your gym by yourself under controlled conditions. You're not going in a live competition setting and you're not forced to having to compete in person. So, and then for the last 4 seasons now, it's been back to essentially what it was before. So it's like, how are we qualifying this statement?
Well, I think so. Let me try and do that. You mentioned 2013 to 2018, 19. And yes, it was more or less a formality for athletes, but they still had to put in a good effort. They still had maybe redid some and had to make sure that they were sure, but they also had to make sure, like, you punt one into the stands, you're in trouble. Now, whereas in this past year,
I don't think that's true.
Well, to finish in the top 40, make it to regionals. Let me ask you, if Tia Toomey and Brooke Wells under the old system, would they have advanced in the top three?
It depends, because they would have had 5 to 6 scored tests, right? So the more tests you add to the fray, the likelihood that an elite athlete can wash a weird performance out is higher, right? So it really does. So we're swapping more scored tests means the Open's going to mean even less for them, and they just simply got to show up and perform.
Mhm.
So it's like, if we're using someone's injury as the reason why, that's one athlete, and we're basing it around one athlete, to me, that's
as a spectator, I've said this before too. It's like, we used to cover the Open when it was Open Regionals games. There's a lot of leaderboard watching, and there was like, okay, who's on the cut line? And there's none of that. So from that standpoint, I think from driving interest in the sport and fan engagement, maybe it doesn't matter as much. So I think that'd be a way to qualify it. But I do see what you're saying about the elite athletes. But I think the bigger point here is that if that is going to happen, something is going to change. Now, whether it's, and you would think it's just a qualification process. I don't think they're going to go back to qualifying people from the Open directly to the games. But you're going to probably have to perform at a certain level during the Open to move on. More, it's going to be, the bar is going to be higher than it is now, I guess is what I'm saying.
Which is really odd to me, because at this point, you're saying, all right, we're going to make yet another change for how many years in a row that it's been that we've had at least some significant change in the system and getting people through the season. And now you're going to make an adjustment to something that potentially has really only had roots for a year. So if you're going to raise the bar in terms of percentage of qualification, what if they get a high turnout for individuals and they realize that, like, this is a huge way to support, age group, all those other things with that, like, lowered bar but higher participation. So you're going to tell me you're going to go through that, or you're going to maybe add weeks to the Open, and now you're going to betray the thing that you've been saying the last 3 years about how a 3-week Open really matters for affiliates, and for the stage of competition this is really is for the broader Gen Pop and affiliates. So we're going to go something against that. I wish there was maybe a little bit more clarity, and maybe this is me just being impatient. I get that. But it's like, well, where do we have left to go that is actually going to fit in line with some of the stated stuff that we've been kind of repeating ad nauseum for the last few years? It seems like to do that, we're going to have to go back on something, and then we're just doing that same cycle over and over again, and we're not building any familiarity with the season, any continuity, any level of consistency that's going to, like, actually help grow the sport long term. I don't know. It's like, why do we keep like tinkering to something that no one's been able to just be like, okay, let's just settle here for a little bit, and let's actually build storytelling and do all these other things around it. Like, I don't know.
I think you bring up some really good points, and I don't know what that's going to be, but it was an interesting topic of conversation, and it kind of got me to raise an eyebrow. I was like, okay, well, if that's the case, then what does that look like?
And who are they going to talk to about making these changes? Are they going to focus group it with anyone, or is it going to be the same, like, little internal team making these decisions?
No idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
Many more questions than answers at this point, but it was an interesting statement that came out of that thing. Okay, next thing that we want to talk about is, everyone knows that by now that the CrossFit Games are going to be in Fort Worth, Texas. Yeah, if you've never been to Fort Worth, Texas, or the South, in the summer, it gets hot, especially in Texas. So there have been some concerns about, okay, well, if you were going to do the games in Texas like you have done them in Madison, and prior to that in Carson, California, there's just going to be a lot of events that are going to be outdoors. Or a good portion of the events are going to be outdoors. Dave Castro, again, a while back on his weekly
weekend review,
weekend review, said, well, 95% of the games are going to be indoors, which still leaves room for something that's going to be outside. So the PFAA essentially sent a letter to CrossFit asking for clarification on that, and it was posted online. I think the PFAA posted something on it. I know Morning Chalk Up. I think Barbell Spin did too. So it was out there, and I wanted to reach out to Brent, and I did, about, okay, what was your goal here And, what were you looking to get in return? And Brent said, this is a lot more financial. The motivation behind this is really more financially driven than anything else.
I would recommend anyone, if you're interested in this, before commenting. I was reading some comments on the internet. Probably should never do that. And there was a myriad of opinions, and most of those opinions were clearly uninformed with the facts that were within the document. So we sent a, it's only 2 pages long, 2-page document to CrossFit explaining why we wanted the information, and what we would sort of accept as some optional responses from them. And the main reason behind it, I think, is a little different than some people are understanding. A lot of it's financial. So this might not be common knowledge, but when you go to the games, like, nothing's paid for by CrossFit. And I'm not saying it should be, but I'm just giving this information. I don't have none of my tickets in the Coliseum are paid for. My accommodation isn't paid for. My flights, meals, anything like that, right? There's certain people, the judges have some of that paid for, the staff, some of the media staff get that paid for. That's fine. We don't. None of the athletes do. You get prize money if you do well. In prior years, if you were in the top 20, you'd get prize money. If you were 21st through 40, $0. In recent years, partially due to some of the work that the PFAA has done, that prize money has gone up. So I actually pulled it up here so I was well informed. If you finished in 30th place, that was $4,750. If you finished in last place, which is 40th, $2,250 US. So for some athletes, that covers a decent amount of the trip. For others, if you're traveling from, Africa or Australia, that doesn't cover your trip, right? Not saying it, money doesn't grow on trees. We also don't know the prize money this year. It could very well go down with the changes in sponsorship for the CrossFit Games. So as an athlete, you're dealing with the financial, thing. Not everyone has the ability to uproot their lives and move to some hot climate for 2 months to do a proper heat acclimatization for competition. So there's a really high cost associated potentially with heat prep. And so the thought being was, well, if there's no official statement, and up until this, there hasn't been any official statement from CrossFit on what the competition in Texas will look like. On Dave Castro's personal YouTube account, he mentioned in sort of passing, it'll be like 95% indoors, which, like, when you actually run the math, that would be 60% of a single event if that's 15 events. So he probably doesn't mean 95%. He means a bit, but also there's nothing holding him to that, right? It could very well be nothing outside. It could be 3 events outside out of 15, which would be 20%. And then if said, hey, you said 95, it's 80, the answer could be, well, I meant 95-ish. So not an official statement. So we were looking for something more official that athletes could then intelligently base their training off of, primarily for financial purposes. Like, again, these athletes, they don't have a lot of money. We don't have like endless supplies of money to do proper heat prep. And so without that information, and if the kind of going assumption based on, word of mouth is, it'll be fine, you'll be inside, the expense of the heat prep won't be worth the risk. So athletes would just not heat prep. They'll just train in an air-conditioned gym. Maybe they'll train outside a bit, whatever that looks like. And they're like, I'll probably be fine. If they go there and there's multiple tests outside, that puts them at a really huge physical risk, right? And that's what it is. It's, athletes aren't looking for some like advantage or something. And before the call started, I made an example. I'm like, well, there's athletes, let's say in Australia and in Africa, South Africa, that are going to qualify for the games, that will be training in their winter, right? So it's 5-10 degrees Celsius outside, which is 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And imagine if they had a competition in their area, whether that's a intermediate or an elite competition. It quite frankly doesn't matter. They're human beings. And so they're competing for 2 days. Hey, come to this competition. They sign up. They pay to sign up. Usually there's a fee as well. For those that don't know, like, I have to pay for a semifinals and a games fee to compete. So I'm paying to compete until I win prize money, which, again, it's fine. I'm not complaining. I'm just giving context. So you pay $300. You go to this competition in Australia. It's 5 degrees outside. You've been training 5 degrees. And they say, hey, we're flying you to this tropical location. It's going to be 38 degrees Celsius or 110 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to be 100% humidity. Let's go. And you start competing outside. I don't think that's safe. Like, and the opinion of the PFAA and the coaches and the athletes we've worked with would say, that's not a safe decision for a competition to make. And so without an official statement, that's kind of what it felt like. That felt like what we were preparing for was like, are we going outside though? Like actually going outside? And so within the document, we listed what we felt were undesirable, good, and great messaging. And one of the great messaging that we said was, confirm there will definitely be multiple tests of multiple time durations that take place outside during all times of the day. Athletes should prepare for a CrossFit Games that includes a similar frequency of indoor and outdoor tests as seen in Madison, Wisconsin for the past few years. This we considered to be a great statement. So that's not us saying, we don't want to go outside. The outside is dangerous. What that's saying is, on average in Madison, 48% of the events are outside. And it's basically saying, hey, saddle up. We're going outside in Texas. And to me, that's acceptable. That's great, because it's like, okay, at least the athletes know what they're signing up for. They know when they pay for their flights. They know when they pay for their accommodation. They know when they pay their registration fee, and they know in their lead up, I got to get ready for this heat. I got to figure this out. And, you know, if they need to figure that out financially, logistically, then they are, you know, able to do so. But without that information, it becomes, you know, this really challenging and kind of scary and daunting, both financial and from a safety standpoint for an athlete to try and make a decision on what do I do for this. So
interesting points from Brent Fikowski about, you know, athletes need to know, if I need to prepare to be outside in this heat, that's going to take some resources. I have to spend some money, especially for athletes who are coming from the Southern Hemisphere, maybe some athletes who are coming from Europe who are not around that climate. You know, how do they get acclimated to it? Well, I don't think they're saying that they don't want, it's like going outside is not going to happen. It's just, we would like to have some information about what to prepare for, so we know that when we show up, that we can be as safe, we can be ready to not put ourselves at risk. So we have prepared to make this as safe as we possibly can.
And I don't think that's a big ask for the athletes, because it has to do with safety, but also a competitive advantage. Like heat training, if you aren't acclimated, that is a huge disadvantage to an athlete. And I understand that the games is unknown and unknowable, and the athletes should show up prepared for anything under the sun. But telling the athletes, hey, we're going to be having events that are before 9 a.m. or nothing until, I think, Sean, you said after 6 p.m., like within windows that seem like they can understand a little bit more. Or, hey, you're going to be outside doing an event at noon. Well, then I need to get my butt to Texas a bit earlier to train for that. And I don't you don't need to tell the athletes what they're doing outside.
Yeah. I think obviously the financial element for the athletes is important, but like for CrossFit as a company, like you want to at least have a semblance of safety precautions in place to make sure that you're at least doing what you can to make sure the event goes on, and that it doesn't just become a battle of who can survive like the heat element. And I don't think it'll necessarily become that. But remember what happened in 2015 with Murph and the heat and a lot of people, and when they did it in the like the hot of the day. And now there was some responsibility on the athletes in terms of like a lot of people didn't bring water out there, and there was a lot. I think there were some athletes that if you pulled them honestly, probably said, "Hey, maybe we underestimated this, and we could have prepared better." But and you saw adjustments on both sides being made the next year in 2016. But I do think with this new situation where it's entirely new host of the CrossFit Games in Fort Worth, it's going to be environmental elements that unlike we've seen before. And even if it's just for a fraction, I think the importance of protecting that info for the sanctity of the competition becomes even less, considering how few events are actually going to be outside. So to me, that would lend itself to CrossFit actually sharing more info. Now, they did respond to the PFAA thing, but it was still kind of vague. And they said like it would be fewer events than there were in Madison. Do you guys see that?
But I don't think that gave, talking to Brent, that was not what they were looking. That's not the information that they were looking for. And he understands too. Like he understands the unknown and the unknowable thing, and that you can't just say, oh yeah, you're going to do this event and fine. But I think to both of your points, there's information that you can share to make sure that athletes are as prepared to handle this as well as they possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even going off of some of the information that PFAA posted, typically between at a low end in Madison, 30, I think we'll say like 38%, and on a high end, 55% of events were outdoors. If you go off of Dave's 95%, you assume at max maybe 2 events is going to, and assuming Dave's a little high on that, at most 2 events are going to go. And you look at the heat index and a lot of the stats that other events use, like whether Sean, I know you looked up some, but like pro tennis for all of the majors, they have a metric that they use. Here it is. It's called what is it called? It's called heat stress scale, which is a combination of radiant heat, air temperature in the shade, relative humidity, wind speed. Like they have rules around that you can't go on beyond that. So I don't know if maybe CrossFit is going to start to develop something for that. And that maybe once they do, they can communicate that to PFAA. I think that's probably a better case scenario in terms of like, hey, let's figure out what our rule is actually going to be. But I mean, there are events like, the Ironman World Championships. We talked about this earlier. Like it's in Kona on the Big Island in Hawaii, where that consistently temperatures are going to be above 80 degrees. You're running and biking through lava fields where temperatures can feel upwards of 100 degrees. That's going to be the case, and you have to adjust accordingly. And temperatures are pretty consistent. Now, granted, you always know you're going to be biking 110 plus miles, and you're going to be running a marathon in those temperatures, and you're going to be swimming 2.4 miles where the water temperature is warmer than anything you've ever seen, and you're probably really not going to have the buoyancy of a wetsuit. That stuff is all known. So I think we have to try and figure out a way where we can bridge that gap for that sport, because it's just not flushed out. And I think CrossFit is chasing its tail a little bit, trying to figure out all this other stuff. That maybe it's something where I like the PFA putting it out and being a driver of this and staying on it.
Yeah. Well, just the only thing I'll add, I know you looked some things up. The stuff that I looked up was mostly around the NFL, because they're the only league. I shouldn't say the only, the one league that has to be the most concerned about this, because that's when they're practicing. They started paying a lot more attention to this stuff about 23 years ago after Corey Stringer died in 2001 from heat exhaustion. Now he was 6'4", 346 pounds. So that's different. And I think most of the serious heat related issues that occur in sports in North America are football related and lineman related. But these leagues are still taking precautions. Teams have taken precautions during training camp to make sure that they're not outside at a certain times, that they're, maybe not doing full padded practice, that they're doing more stuff inside, that they're, doing stuff at night. So it's not unprecedented for some sort of, precautions to be taken here. And to your point, Tommy, I think like there is some information that you should be able to get out there without taking away the integrity of the test.
And maybe they just don't have the info yet. Maybe that's
probably the best answer too.
But in order to continue professionalizing the sport and moving it forward and building trust with the athletes, which is something that I think CrossFit historically has struggled with, maybe more on the community side than the athletes, but like what a great way to build trust, to be transparent about what they can expect when it comes to the heat, especially at a new venue and a new location that most people haven't been to.
Yes.
Yeah. There's got to be a way you can protect the product, which the NFL has been adamant about, understanding that in order to have long-term success, you have to protect your product. Even if they haven't done so in the past, and they don't exactly have a great track record. And also maintain the integrity of what the claim of finding the fittest is, right? Because there is an element of adaptation to that. That's important. So, but yeah, is it like, do you lean to finding the fittest more from like a, I don't know, very raw, like survival of the fittest type thing, or are you actually just testing them and allowing them to
Well, we'll see if any more information comes out of that, but I just thought it was important to get some clarification from Brent, and it was good to get his perspective on that.
For sure.
Quarterfinals, mentioned that at the top of the show. Individuals start next week. The teams are done. And as we just found out today, and it's a recurring issue. You can go to barbellspin.com and you can check out that article, is that now some teams have been ruled ineligible because they have violated, I'll throw the article up here from Barbell Spin, for violating team eligibility requirements. And as you scroll through this and read it, and I would encourage everybody to go to the barbellspin.com and check this out, is, it's stuff where teams like just clearly didn't read the rules and left things up to a judgment call. I got the CLT, the Grid House, on here, what they went through, but it's like you gotta know this stuff.
The entire team needs to know this
Yes.
stuff. If I'm on the team with the two of you and I realize one of you isn't doing the open at the affiliate that we're supposed to do it at, like, how are there no alarms from 4 people on each of these teams?
Well,
I just like,
and
nobody's reading. It's incompetence.
For Josh Harden, and I'm going to read for the article here. Josh Harden originally did 24.1 at his affiliate, CrossFit CLT. Okay, great. However, he was unhappy with his score and decided to redo the workout from the fire station because he's a firefighter for the city of Charlotte. He videoed the workout and submitted the video with his updated score. And it was 7 seconds faster than his original performance, although it was not counted for his team score as it was not one of the 2 fastest men score on his team. But with when the team was notified that Harden had violated the rules, the team asked if they could use his original score, as they had video proof with a timestamp that his first attempt was completed at the affiliate. According to Kevin Steinhaus, the team captain, CrossFit responded and said the ruling is final. So again,
I kind of agree with CrossFit in that situation.
I know,
like,
it seems a little petty, but this is why you can't.
Seem petty. It seems petty, but it's so easy to read rules. You do it for a job. You do it anytime you commit to something and put effort in. Like, I'm just sick of people just blaming negligence. Like, we didn't know. It's right there. In this situation, the answer is right in front of you.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I can't.
It's tough.
I don't die on many hills, but I will die on this one.
These athletes, I really do feel bad. And I think there's, if I'm just Joe fan at home, like, oh, come on, are you serious about this? But if it's in the rules, it's like there's constantly this battle back and forth of, if you're going to make the rule, you need to enforce it. And go back to, the Roman Krenikov rower thing last year, right? Like, okay, if you're going to get mad at that, then you've got to say, okay, well, this is the rule, and they enforce it. Like, if it's letter of the law stuff. And again, I hate that they can't compete. I don't like that, but
no, it sucks. But
and it creates this slippery slope of non-professionalism, right? Because trying to elevate the professionalism of the sport happens on multiple fronts. It's CrossFit being able to clearly state and uphold the rules. It's the athletes being able to adhere to the rules, actually take their part in their personal accountability and adhering to them. And if it constantly becomes this finger pointing of, well, you didn't, so I don't have to, then it's just going to be a slippery slope of falling into chaos. And I would have a little bit more sympathy if this was a relatively new issue on the team side of things. But team eligibility has been a thing for quite some time. And one thing has stayed constant as far as like going far back to the original Hacks Pack Ute and people pointing fingers about eligibility there. If you weren't proactive in documenting and then communicating with CrossFit, if any questions arise early on, then you are asking for a judgment call when it comes to enforcing the rule. And if you think you're going to change CrossFit's mind or be able to advocate yourself on the backside of that, then you're very clearly mistaken. And that's irrespective of who you are as a team and what year it's been. That has been over a decade plus. And in this instance, it was very clear and very simple that you have to you perform all of these workouts in the same location.
Yeah.
Right. And if it wasn't, then you open yourself up to being, disqualified like they were. And now, granted, are there extenuating circumstances that could seem petty? Sure. But there's also an opportunity, I think, for the athletes ahead of time. And I'm a little bit more lenient toward Maxime on ADM because it seemed like it was a sudden thing.
He had to leave he had to leave the country and did an open workout in Florida, and his gym is in Canada.
Yes. So if you the one thing that CrossFit has always been receptive to on when it comes to adjustments is if you communicate ahead of time. Now, granted, with emergencies, you may not have lead time, and that's probably the last thing that's on your mind. If it is a true emergency, I don't know, but in that instance, there's also a checks and balances and a weighing of the scale here. Is being eligible for a team more important than this whatever emergency? And clearly in this instance, there's probably the answer is no. So if that's the case, then it's like, okay, well, you have to make your priorities here. But if it is, then you got to fire off an email, reach out some communication so CrossFit can document that. Beyond that, man, it's like, why are you leaving up your season to something so simple?
Yeah, well, I think, and we had a conversation with Adrian Bosman a while ago. I'm pretty sure it was him. And so I apologize if it wasn't Adrian who said this. So I'm pretty sure it was. And we were talking about just the professionalization and dealing with rules and stuff like that, and how on the individual side, I think the individuals are doing, the top tier individuals are doing a much better job at understanding the drug testing policy and what I need, how I get a therapeutic use exemption and how I need to monitor everything. They're very good at that. Whereas with teams, you have some people who have not really been involved in the sport at such a high level to where they have to worry about that stuff. And now all of a sudden they're in a setting to where they do need to worry about it. And it's not just, hey, let's get together, put a team together and have some fun and see what happens. Like, that's fine. But if you're going to do that, you have to understand now all of a sudden you're subject to the same rules that govern the professional individuals. And some people just aren't used to doing that. You know?
Sure. And I do think there is you can place a smidgen of blame on CrossFit in terms of setting the tone for the adherence of rules in the system, right? I think some of the laissez-faire attitude over the last few years have been around maybe some perceived inconsistencies around communication, around how they get the message out on how certain rules are applied and how sometimes there's a judgment call being made and sometimes there isn't. So I think that perpetuates this idea that maybe I can play with fire and not get burned, but understand that in the end, you are still playing with fire. And this is entirely possible if you don't follow it to the letter of the law. And if you don't communicate in the case of extenuating circumstances.
I mean, it's too bad. It's just, it is, you hate to see it because now these teams aren't able to compete. You know, they're not going to.
Yeah. Some high level teams, you know, from the Grit House that went to the games.
So anyway, wanted to get that out there. And again, it's the article. You can read all the details. It's on the barbellspin.com. So definitely check that out if you want to know more. All right. Those are our headlines for this week.